has been 3 months since the crash. Is the investigation on pace?
It's difficult for us to comment about the pace of the investigation. Our investigation in our office is currently on track, gathering documents and talking to individuals that we believe may have information. That information is not public right now. We understand the AAIB can take up to a year to issue their final report, the preliminary report, which was fairly quick but highly decontextualized and led to more questions than it provided answers.
Concern is, how many families have joined you so far?
Right. So far, we represent the families of approximately 110 victims, and that's a mix of people who were both on the aircraft and on the ground.
It has been 3 months since the crash. Is the investigation on pace or it's falling behind?
Yeah, so our investigation in our office is currently on track. We are continuing to work with our experts, gathering documents, and talking to individuals that we believe may have information helpful to our investigation. It's difficult for us to comment about the pace of the investigation occurring either at Boeing or with the AAIB because, as you know, that information is not public right now. We understand the AAIB can take up to a year to issue their final report, and we hope they may be forthcoming with information before then. But right now, we are continuing our own investigation.
Okay. And as compared to your previous experience in other crashes, do you think the current investigation is on pace?
Well, as you know, the AAIB released the preliminary report, which was fairly quick but highly decontextualized and led to more questions than it provided answers. Based on previous cases, so far this appears to be following about the same track in terms of the pace. We would hope, though, that there would be more information coming sooner than later.
Okay. And many families have lost their the only breadwinner that they have in their family. So do you think the 1 crore, the one-time 1 crore payment that Air India is offering to Tata, is it enough?
Well, I mean, I think it's the one-time payment that's currently being offered, I think is certainly helpful to families in the short term. But in terms of long-term payments for them, a one-time payment is certainly not going to be enough to offset the loss of income or the loss of the family member to these families. And so the answer to your question is no, that payment is not going to be sufficient over the rest of their lives.
Do you think that the documents that the Tata or the Air India have are making the families sign? Do you think it would negatively impact the US claims against Boeing?
And so I think what you're asking about are the waivers or claim forms that families are being requested to sign for the interim payments. We had an opportunity to look at some of the early documents that were being offered by Air India. And at least with respect to the one small waiver provision that I noticed, or actually it was an indemnity provision, all it spoke to was the requirement for the person receiving the money on behalf of the family to agree to indemnify against other family members who might come forward later. That should have no effect whatsoever in claims against Boeing or other companies. I have not seen all of the proposed language yet from Tata, and so it's difficult to say what they may or may not be requiring families to sign. But certainly we think it would be inappropriate for them to sign any language that could hamper their later recoveries.
Okay. Do you think that the UK as well as the UK and the Indian government are taking an active role in this investigation?
I'm not sure that the UK government is taking an active role. I know that death inquests have been opened. into some of the cases. And in particular, I think there have been some questions regarding remains that were provided that may not have been correct, or at least that was the allegation. So I think the government in the UK has gotten involved with that respect. I'm not sure it has any active role in the defect or the crash investigation. We know that the head of the AAIB stood before Parliament and spoke and pledged independence from the government and the political process. However, we also know that the Indian government is very likely involved in the investigation. And so, again, until the final report is issued, we will not know what parties played a role and what information may be forthcoming.
Okay. In the preliminary report, it says that the fuel switches went from run to cut off like within a second. Like, do you think it's even possible?
Yeah, that's a good question. We know that there are several issues there. One is with respect to the granularity of the way time is marked on the recorder. It's possible that they both moved at the same time, just within a millisecond or two of each other, which may have triggered this recording of time on one side or the other of the 1 second mark, if that makes sense. Essentially simultaneously, but it could have shown up as being a second apart. We don't think that that's likely from a human perspective, whether it's possible. I've not personally done those tests. I can tell you that it doesn't seem likely. What does seem likely, however, is that the computer itself can trigger that change, certainly within a second. And so that fits a little bit closer to the theories that are currently being discussed with respect to shorts and or automated or uncommanded changes in the computer system.
Ronnie, what are these theories about the short? Like, how do they explain the work?
Yeah. So one of the current theories that's being explored among several others is this issue of water leaks in water lines underneath the forward and aft lavatories of the plane, including the galley areas. Those are areas that are over what's referred to as an EE bay, and those are areas in which computer equipment is housed. We know from prior FAA and Boeing documents publicly available that there have been reports in the field of water lines leaking into the EE bays, causing computer equipment to become wet and in some cases having to be replaced. That's something that has gone back in the documents at least as far back as 2016 and perhaps earlier. The most recent directive that we've seen was to take effect about 6 months after our crash, which obviously would not have helped us in this case. But essentially what can happen is water from faulty couplings can leak into areas that were not properly waterproofed at the time of manufacture. And that water can leak into the equipment bays and cause the computers to become wet. If that happens, according to the FAA, those leaks can cause electrical shorts, which can lead to the loss of computers and equipment critical for safety and flight.
Ronnie, like, whom responsibility do you think the like this issue was, like the water leak? Like, was it only Boeing or only Air India or both of them?
In terms of responsibility for the leaks?
Yeah, in terms of like keeping an eye about the water leaks, like if something like that is happening, or like what could have been done to prevent it?
Okay. So the manufacturer of the plane obviously is responsible for defects that can exist in the plane at the time it leaves the manufacturer. So in this case, if the couplings were defective at the time they left Boeing, then Boeing could be held responsible for those. Similarly, if Boeing failed to install proper waterproofing and sealing in areas over these EE bays, they can also be responsible for that if that is determined to be a causal factor in what happened here. Now, the next question becomes, where does maintenance play a role in this? And we don't know the answer to that yet because we don't know what maintenance may or may not have been performed by Air India in the interim period. We also don't know what sort of emphasis may have been placed on these issues by Boeing or the FAA so that Air India may or may not have been aware of this problem sufficiently and may or may not have known to do the maintenance.